Hey, if you're a diesel truck fan and you're curious why you need DEF fluid and why this emissions equipment and why diesels don't seem as good as the old ones and all stuff going on, I got some great answers for you today. I'm going to interview my friend Allen Schaeffer from the Diesel Technology Forum. It's an advocacy group out of basically Washington, D.C. area, and they do a lot with manufacturers and innovations, and are really deeply involved in diesel technology. It's really interesting stuff in this interview. And oh, hey, if this first time here, my name is Tim. Welcome to Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk on this channel. We do truck and SUV news, reviews, interesting interviews like this one. Make sure you subscribe, click the bell, and smash the like button. We're talking trucks, which are my favorite thing. So follow along with my passion as we do more in-depth stuff. I have oil conversations and frame conversations and really interesting detailed stuff. So I'm going to stop blabbering. We get the interview right now. And I'm joined by Allen Schaeffer. He's Executive Director of the Diesel Technology Forum. And we have some top 5 myths. I figured I'd get an expert. I could tell you these myths answers, but why would I do all the work when he's going to do it for me? See, it's perfect. Thanks for joining me, Allen.
Hey, nice to be with you, Tim.
All right, for those who don't know, what kind of background do you have in diesels and diesel technology?
Well, let's see. So the Diesel Technology Forum actually celebrates its 20th year this year. And,
Congrats.
before that, I was working in the trucking industry at the American Trucking Associations on environmental policy stuff. And, I've got a background in public health and environmental science. So that's kind of my shtick. But, I've always had a great appreciation for the transportation sector, and this being a champion and a cheerleader for diesel in the last 20 years has been, nothing but good fun for the most part. The last couple of years have been a little challenging, but fundamentally it's still a great technology, and it keeps getting better all the time. So nice to be with you again.
So you have done a lot over the last couple decades with diesel technology. You've seen stuff change as evolution of things. And I think what's interesting right now, especially with COVID going on, is we're seeing some air quality that's just amazing, right? And the birds are flying back here, and the sunny skies are up, and the rainbows are going across the city, right? And clearly, air quality is always tied to car emissions, and car emissions have always been tied to the dirty diesels. So there's a connection there, right, between dirty diesels and clean air?
Well, yes and no. I think we've all seen this around the globe, not just in Southern California, but in Europe and other places. Have seen dramatic reductions in air emissions from their transportation segments being shut down. And what's interesting about, particularly about the LA case, is that while passenger traffic dropped off dramatically, the diesel trucks are still on the road, right? They were delivering all the essential goods, the food, the medicine, the ventilators, all of the personal protective equipment. All of that stuff moves by truck, right? So what you have is a situation where, gosh, the air did get a lot cleaner. And what happened to truck traffic during this time? Well, it was down about 25%, but car traffic was down by like 46%. So you have to look at that and say, air pollution is a complex problem, and all these kinds of vehicles contribute in some way or the other. But it's not fair to single out diesel as the primary cause of air pollution in California. And I think we have seen in recent times there a whole range of California policies that kind of work against clean air. And the greatest example of that is they have this fleet rule they enacted 5 years ago that says, come 2023, the only vehicle that you'll be able to register in the state of California will be a truck that's 2011 and later model year. So they're going to force commercial trucks only into the new generation SCR clean diesel kind of technology. So what happened when that rule came out was everybody said, you know what, I'm just going to hang on to my old truck for a while. And so what that's done in the last 5 years is delay clean air progress. So we have now California ranks 45 out of 50 states for the adoption of the newest generation of diesel in commercial trucks. And so, when you say, why are the air quality problems in California the way they are? It's not just kind of what's happening on the road, but it's also the policies that are leading to some of that as well. So, diesel's changed dramatically over the last 2 decades, and over 98% reduction in particulates and nitrogen oxides, and we can go on about some of those statistics. But this pandemic has shown us that when things come to a screeching halt, air quality can improve. And the footnote, of course, is that all the while diesel trucks are out there operating.
I can't believe that politicians' legislation would have unintended consequences.
You're saying that with a very sarcastic look, and you'd be right. I mean, we bring this up whenever we can because, it just paints a picture of California wanting to push so far away from any kind of fossil fuel technology, yet adopting policies that force people in the real world to make real world decisions, which is, I'm not going to buy a new truck now. I'll wait, and see where I am in 7 years. And so now we wonder, what does this pandemic do to those kinds of assumptions about air quality, how fast people are going to buy new technology? Can people buy new technology? So I think we have a lot to learn and discuss in the coming months about all of this. And we'll see where that takes us.
And speaking of this next generation clean diesel technology and stuff, I mean, I had a question today on the YouTube channel that somebody said, isn't GM done experimenting with this DEF stuff? Why don't you just get rid of it? And so, I mean, you still got guys who are saying, well, this new diesel technology, this new emission stuff has destroyed the diesels. I mean, the new diesels aren't any good. So are this emissions technology any decent, I guess would be the way to say it?
I mean, I hear that, and I've been around the trucking industry since dare I say, the mid 80s. And so I've seen the full transition of technologies from old, mechanically controlled engines to today's super advanced selective catalytic reduction controlled machines. And, I think we all have that kind of feeling. I mean, think about it like appliances. You say like, gosh, that old washer I have, I hope that never breaks because I hear the new ones are really unreliable and they cost a lot. And that is true in the case of appliances. I've gone through that, trust me. But one of the reasons that we have evolved so far in diesel now is because we have to make this technology be able to play in the future. And to do that, it's got to get much, much cleaner. And we've accomplished that goal of almost eliminating emissions from commercial vehicles and diesel engines, commercial diesel vehicles. And even in the passengers and pickup trucks, emissions are way down for those as well. New engine standards have been in place now for, this is 10 years since the 2010 standards hit. So we've got a decade of experience. And while I am extremely aware from doing things like this and talking to real people out there that there's a lot of unhappy folks that how things have changed. And, I don't like having to worry about DEF filling it up and, particulate filters are just a problem. And, I hear all that and I understand it. And I'm sure some of that is, is spot on. Everybody has their own experience, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of issues now, especially like, are we going to continue to be able to have diesel at all? And so, to get diesel to a point that it can compete today and in the future, we've got to have these very low emissions, which is why manufacturers have done what they've done using these technologies like SCR and diesel exhaust fluid. I don't know that those are absolutely going away at any point in the future. I will say that there's plenty of innovation and improvement in those systems in terms of making them smaller, more efficient, driving down some of the consumption of some of these products like DEF in some cases. So I see manufacturers continuing to innovate around diesel and try and do things to make that system, more palatable for consumers. But as I told somebody right at the outset when all these rules kicked in, this is the cost of clean air. You and I and our communities, our kids, our grandkids, everybody's benefiting from that. So think of it this way, that by investing in the newest technology that's lower in emissions, yeah, it's going to be a hassle for you at some point. Instead of just doing an oil change, you're going to have to top off your DEF. But at the end of the day, look what you're doing for the environment and to help make things better. And I think most people want to feel good about that and doing the right thing. This is the right thing.
And then speaking of the right thing, I hear the right thing all the time with diesel is to delete everything. That's the best thing you can do with the diesel truck. Delete all the emissions equipment, just get rid of it. It improves fuel economy and it makes it more powerful, right? I mean, this is what you're hearing too, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I said earlier, I mean, there's no question that a lot of activities and things that have been done to make diesel emissions more efficient and lower in emissions, have impacted some of the raw, pure diesel performance that folks might remember from 10 or 20 years ago. But again, this is because we need to have clean air. And when folks take matters into their own hands and, go out there with the torch and cut off a filter or bypass it somehow, or, download some software or put a new chip in that creates performance enhancements. And I'm not talking about folks that do performance events on the weekends, like dyno sport kind of things, or tractor pulling and uh, pulling kind of contests. Those are what those kind of things were designed for. It's folks that want to make those changes though, and then go operate out and operate that truck or that vehicle on the road all the time. And when you take those things off, then you're number one, you're doing worse for air quality than you should be. Number two, you're subjecting yourself to the risk of enforcement, and tampering with emissions controls is serious business. I mean, just last week, EPA announced $11 million worth of fines and civil penalties and adjustments of manufacturers and sellers of some of these performance-related products, chippers or tuners, as we might say. Some folks that can modify the software to delete the function of the DPF or to mimic the SCR system's sense of diesel exhaust fluid. All of those things, are ones that are illegal under the Clean Air Act today and cause a huge amount of problems for the owner. I mean, don't ever plan on selling that vehicle because, folks, you're not going to be able to get it inspected. Folks are not going to want to buy a vehicle that's been heavily modified. If that's been messed around with, what else has? So there's a lot of concern about that. I completely understand folks wanting to amp up their performance a little bit and, do those kind of things. But we've seen, I think in recent times, a big crackdown on this by EPA, particularly in the Northeast. I know they're very interested in it. And they're out doing spot checks. They're going to used truck dealers and they're looking around and seeing what's out there and who's doing what. And, it's nothing but bad things can come of using delete kits and other things.
Yeah, I'm hearing this new term to me. It was called the EPA Police. I had not heard that one before, but it sounds like it's a thing. As civil fines are getting up there. We had recently, I don't know, like a month ago, Diesel Brothers had to pay a massive fine, and that made big news. And he tried to defend his point, but he took it all the way to court, and he lost.
He did, and that was brought by a group of physicians in the state of Utah. And again, I think I really respect how much people that love the diesel for what it is really love it, and they really will. Always been a diesel guy, and they've got their brand, whether it's Chevy or Ford or Ram. But at the end of the day, those kind of changes just they make life very complicated, and ultimately these are the kind of things that make people not like diesel. When you see coal rolling videos online or those kinds of things, the last 2 years I've personally been involved in 5 state legislatures that have adopted new state laws to either crack down on or elevate enforcement for coal rolling. And this is, black smoke on demand. Yeah. And, these all weigh in to the sociability of diesel. And we've all seen some of these stories from Europe and other places. Oh, we're going to ban diesel and gas engines by 2030. And a lot of folks say, well, that's never going to happen. I mean, come on. It might happen. And there's actually been legislation introduced in California to stop that. And it's tending more towards measures for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. But it's also, frankly, if a technology is being, abused in some way or, made to be more problematic for emissions than it is on its own, then, that can further fuel the fire of politicians and others who say, let's just get rid of it. Let's ban it. We're not going to buy any more of it. With that, then you start losing jobs for diesel mechanics and technicians and parts suppliers. And, so it goes down the food chain. So I like to think of, folks that love and have their diesel pickup trucks, keep loving them, keep doing the things that make you happy with that. But, do it in a way that's not really bad for society and doesn't make you feel, bad when you put your kid in the back of that crew cab and, do you want them to see black smoke rolling out of there? I mean, they got a generation, they're going to have to deal with a lot of tough issues, and we don't want that to be one of them.
Yeah, sure. So speaking on what's going on right now, we're looking at like oil prices have just rock bottom, just completely destroyed the marketplace. We got guys in Texas out of work. I got guys in this channel that just have lost their entire livelihood. And what I thought was interesting is my dad and I were talking about this a little bit, is that for years, diesel has always been cheaper than gas at the pump. But in the last 3 or 4 years, that's changed, and now it's even more of a difference. Do you have any understanding of why pricing is so weird right now with diesel?
Well, it's a complicated situation. I think, you know, if we went back to the late 90s, diesel and gas were trading about this way that you just described, where gas was always a little more expensive. And then we got into the changes in diesel fuel, the desulfurization. So as we started on the path to ultra low sulfur diesel, there's a cost for removing sulfur from fuel. So I think that was the primary thing, the signal that sent the cost of diesel over top the cost of gasoline. And that's going to be with us, I think, for a long time. That's sort of built into the refining process now. Some of the more recent dynamics in the last couple of months with this pandemic, for example, you know, it. I mean, this year has been really nutty for diesel fuel, right? We started out the year, people had huge anxiety about the new International Maritime Organization, the IMO, new sulfur requirements for all the ocean-going vessels, and how those were going to cause huge problems with supply of ultra low sulfur diesel fuel for trucks and pickup truck owners here in the States, because all of a sudden these marine vessels were going to have to start using the same kind of fuel the highway vehicles use. So there's a big fear that that was going to be, the prices were going to go way up, the supply was going to go down. That didn't materialize. In part, there was a little bit of a reprieve through March. And then what happened was the pandemic. And then just on the leading edge of that, we had this price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia about about crude oil prices, and they were doing everything possible to sort of make the U.S. Oil industry extremely non-competitive outside of what happened with the COVID-19, the pandemic. So you had multiple forces at work: the IMO thing, the global oil fight between the Saudis and the Russians, and then on top of that, this whole mess with the pandemic and the drop off in transportation fuel demand. So we have this huge glut of oil these days now. And, what does that mean for diesel fuel prices in the future? I think, I just looked right now, diesel is down. It's 254 a gallon, and it was 327 a gallon a year ago. So it's down pretty good. Gasoline is the lowest right now it's been in 20 years. I filled up one of our cars this weekend. It was $1.69 a gallon, and my diesel I'm paying about 250. So it's a huge disparity. And so I think one thought is that this global economy has to keep moving, and diesel fuel is the lifeblood of the global commerce system, whether it's moving ocean freighters or railroad or what have you. So diesel fuel is going to always be in demand. And as we see the growing number of electric vehicles and passenger cars, that demand for gasoline is going to be tailing off over time. And the existing vehicles are more fuel efficient. So diesel fuel becomes very important to the refining industry as a very profitable product and one they can rely on for commercial use. So I don't think, I think that right now we're going to see the suppressed prices for diesel are going to stay down for a while, but it's not going to be any long-term big drop like we're seeing for gasoline. It just is not going to come to be. So we'll have to kind of bear with that.
I have a related question to this. I just happened to think about was that in there's been a lot of talk in gasoline about using a higher octane level in gasoline vehicles, especially turbocharged engines, because
Yeah.
the gasoline vehicles are all basically going turbos. I mean, it's like every truck I drive it's a gasoline engine. It's got to have a turbo in it somewhere, it seems like. And so they're talking about making the national mandate a higher octane level of gasoline. But when I've had a few diesels around my area and I've gone to fill up, it's like gas. I get 3 or 4 different levels of cetane or octane levels, and then I just have one diesel choice.
Yeah.
Is there anything going on technology wise to like have more offerings to offer more of a combustion product or something better?
Well, I wish I could say the answer to that was yes, but we have seen some marketers in some parts of the country try and sell a more premium diesel. I think Shell sold a some, I forget what they call it now, performance diesel or something like that a couple of years ago. And that, remember, the EPA specs for minimum cetane is 40. And I think they were selling that fuel for minimum cetane of 45. And so the, but they were selling it, for probably 8, 9 cents more a gallon. And because the bulk of diesel fuel consumption in the US is from commercial vehicles, those kinds of, modest gains in cetane don't really offer anything to the trucking industry other than higher price. But for, you and I driving a passenger vehicle or a pickup truck, a higher cetane fuel would make the combustion process of diesel more efficient, smoother, and it would probably make us, have a better kind of ride. So while it'd be great to see enhancement of cetane in the natural fuel supply, I don't necessarily see that coming, just because the petroleum distribution system and marketing is not necessarily set up to provide even, today we have growing number of biodiesel availability, but the number of pumps being offered at kind of mainstream stations are still not, anywhere near the choices you find for gasoline vehicles. So I think if any investments are to be made, those are going to be the investments made by the refining sector to bring in some of the biodiesel fuels to offer those to consumers rather than some kind of mid-grade or cetane enhanced premium diesel. I just don't see it happening. There is a huge, just so you know, there's a whole bunch of work going on diesel fuel quality now. Some research going on and some contracts are out there looking at fuel quality up and down the distribution network. I think, what's happened over time is these common rail systems have gone from 5,000 psi to some of the newer ones are now 40,000 psi. So what you have is a lot less room for, for impurity in the system, not just the quality of the fuel coming out of the refiner, but all throughout the food chain of supply and distribution network, the tanks, the filter system on the vehicle. And so there's a bunch of work going on, studies that are being done right now to try and understand what's out there. You know, what role are biofuels playing in any of this stuff? I kind of think of it like having hard water. I mean, you get scales on your shower head and stuff, yeah, it works okay, but at some point you feel like you want to clean that off because the flow is way down. And, I think there's a lot of room for impurities in tank trucks. I mean, you know, some fuel quality issues out there with not only regular diesel, but also biodiesel. And so, there's a range of issues there. I don't know where that goes, but, fuel quality and hygiene are just, very simple things that folks have to be mindful of. And it's, staying away from stations that have low throughput of fuel, know where you're getting your biofuels from and make sure it's, fresh tanks and those kind of things. So,
And now, the $50 question you get asked all the time: are today's diesels better than the older diesels you had like 20 years ago or 10 years ago?
yeah, what's your definition of better? Everybody's got their own definition of better. I think, they're certainly better from an efficiency perspective. I mean, diesels have always been a very efficient fuel and technology. But, if you took a look at like the commercial trucks for a second, the fuel economy on big rigs, 5, 6 miles a gallon, like forever, right, on average. And those kind of costs get passed on to consumers and society in general. So, with the advent of advanced electronic engine controls and high pressure fuel injection, common rail systems, we now have the ability to have over the road tractor trailers hitting, double digit fuel economy. Now that's, being really careful about it and having a lot of aerodynamics and other things, but it's a huge leap forward. So from an efficiency side and fuel consumption, you definitely feel like the engine has been dramatically improved to be more efficient. And, with that, it's also now near zero emission. So if you define better 20 years ago as seeing black smoke as sense of power, then today you're going to say, nah, the engines are not any better. They're worse. But if you care about fuel economy and cost and kind of your footprint that you're leaving in the environment, you look at today's technology and say, wow, it's unbelievable that we can have a diesel that has no visible smoke. I mean, these things are super clean. In fact, what we're seeing now in the light duty side is with gasoline direct injection vehicles, they're having to put on particulate filters, right? Particulate filters are doing great things from diesel. In fact, now in Southern California, it's brake dust and tire wear that contribute more fine particles to the air inventory than heavy duty Class 8 trucks. So think about that for a second. So as we as a nation kind of address these environmental and air quality and climate kinds of issues, these kinds of technologies that really allow efficiencies to be gained and emissions to be reduced. I mean, that's your opening hand just to get into the game, right? And now you're going to be competing in the future with all these other kinds of technologies. So when somebody says their diesel engine's better today than they were 20 years ago, I say, yes, they have to be. Because if you're not improving that technology all the time, then, something else is going to come along and eat your lunch. And, I think for there's all kinds of developments in hydrogen and fuel cells and electrification. And, we see all this kind of stuff like is diesel going away? We certainly don't think anytime soon diesel is going away. I mean, for multiple decades, that it's still going to be the main technology for commercial goods movement around the world. For passenger vehicles, it's going to be a very competitive space. But I think, everybody's encouraged this year where you've got, for the first time, all the big three manufacturers finally have a full-size diesel pickup truck option for customers. And so, this pandemic is certainly not going to help, sales, at least, sort of understand what reality really is. Are these trucks really doing well or not so well because of the pandemic or because people don't want diesel? I mean, it's going to be hard to sort out for a little while. But, if you can go buy a new Chevy Silverado that's getting 33 combined on the highway, that's pretty good. I mean, that's going to be good for a long time. And when you think about keeping a pickup truck for, let's say you keep it 200,000 miles for these diesels, that's, just getting broken in. At 20 miles a gallon average fuel economy, you're putting 10,000 gallons of fuel through that truck over the course of those 200,000 miles. So, vehicles that are more fuel efficient, are really good, not just for your wallet, but also for the environment and for reducing greenhouse gases and all of that. So I'm really encouraged this year that we've got, those options. I can't wait to see the market, pan out for diesel in the pickup truck space. I mean, and then we have, the Suburban and Tahoe, the SUVs, the big SUVs. I think, this is our 20th year at the forum. I swear to God, the first 5 years, I would get a couple of calls a year from somebody that said, when can I get a diesel back in that Suburban? And I didn't have a good answer. The answer was, I don't know. You have to go talk to General Motors and Chevy. And, now we know the answer, that you can get it in 2020. So I think that's great because those vehicles with their big footprint, they make a huge amount of sense, whether you're towing a boat or a trailer or just hauling that vehicle and stuff around. I mean, that's where you really get the bang for the buck from the diesel.
Yeah, a funny story about that. I was at Detroit, wherever they unveiled that Suburban and Tahoe, and Mark Royce was on stage and he says, "Yeah, we're gonna have a diesel Suburban," and he just starts going on, and we all stopped him. We were all clapping, and he was like, "Oh, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "We've been telling you this stuff for 20 freaking years," and
Right.
finally made a
Exactly.
difference. I got
Exactly.
one final question for you. Look, I just ran a video, I don't know, a week ago or so. There's speculation that Chevy's going to kill the Colorado diesel, and there's been some concerns about that as far as offline speed, but it's a diesel. I don't know. There's just these people come with these ideas and this stuff. But
Mhm.
what do you think about? I know I talked to you every couple of years. It seems like some years you really up. Lots of new vehicles are out there, and some years things are down a little bit. It seems like there's always moving, evolution about vehicles coming out, coming down. But what does the future of diesel look like in right now? I mean, I just happened to see a story in Europe. Mercedes-Benz has a diesel hybrid, which people have been asking about for a long time. So I think it's an interesting marriage of technologies. I don't know if
Mhm.
it really pans out because diesel's a good at low end torque and hybrid's a good at low end torque. It's kind of an interesting thing. But when you see next 5 years, so what are you looking at?
Well, if you would have asked me this question back in January, the answer would be, um, it's full size pickup trucks and large SUVs. And because of all the things diesel offers, this is the right place to be right now. Because, in America, if you look at the trends of what people are buying, right, it's cars are on the way out. It's all crossovers and SUVs, and the bigger vehicles are doing pretty good. And the other footnote on that is they're also hugely profitable for manufacturers. So when you think about what's selling and what's selling well and what you make money on, it's large vehicles. And diesel is perfectly suited for those kind of vehicles. So, you feel very bullish about the opportunity for the full size pickup trucks. We have always had the heavy duty segment, those over 8,500 pounds with the dualies, et cetera. And those will always be there because a lot of them are used for commercial purposes. But so we would see a market growing. I don't know, could you get up into the 6, 7, 8, God forbid 10% of the full size pickup truck market with diesel? Maybe. I mean, if it's a really honking thing and you got the big three, duking it out each year, making maybe. Well, we're not in January 2020. We're now in May of 2020, where a lot of crazy things have happened. I think, manufacturers are thinking about all these things, where they have commitments and where their investments are and how far down the road are they with some technologies. They've got a lot of investment towards the future. And, a lot of that was predicated on, revenue from right now and selling vehicles right now, which means, those profitable large vehicles and pickup trucks and diesels, et cetera. Um, I think we need to hit the pause button on that question a little bit, because I think the next 6 months will give us some signals about where that goes. But I think fundamentally for diesel, there's always going to be a future there. It's going to be in the larger vehicles. I don't know about the smaller end stuff. We've already seen a lot of manufacturers, kind of move away from that. Mazda had, after the longest wait ever, came out with their CX-5 last year. I was in New York at the auto show when they unveiled it. You know, got a lot of attributes there. I mean, they already have very fuel efficient gasoline SUVs that compete with it. And then, we see, some pretty substantial discounting on that product come late last year, early this year. So that, is a clue to me that, maybe it didn't take off as well as they thought for their consumer. So now I think everybody's looking at, what does the consumer want? What can they afford? What do they want to invest in now? Are they more risk averse? Is that electric pickup truck going to be still as attractive, or do I want to withdraw back to what I know is tried and true? Big bore gasoline engine and a fuel efficient diesel. So I think, diesel is going to benefit a little bit from that, because it is proven, it's available, it's here now. We've got, the great technology and the service networks are all in place. And some of the pressure might be eased up a little bit on some of these alternatives, which, every manufacturer is asking those soul searching questions right now, I'm sure. But I think, again, fundamentally, the future for diesel and large vehicles in the U.S. is pretty strong. Pickup trucks, large SUVs, we just need more of them.
Yeah, sounds good. So where can people find out more about Diesel Technology Forum?
Yeah, so you can visit our website at www.dieselforum.org. Take a look. We've got a whole section there on diesel drivers and vehicles that are available in the U.S. and fuel quality requirements for B20 and other things there, as well as a whole host of information about policy issues and trends in the industry.
Oh, good stuff. Thanks for joining me, Alan.
Hey, Tim, thank you very much.
There you go. Hope you enjoyed the interview and hope you found it useful and informative. Make sure you comment below. Let me know if you have follow-up questions, if you liked it, didn't like it, whatever. I'm always open to what you guys are saying. And yes, I do read the comments. I know, shocking. Anyways, I'll make sure I put it linked on the website below to find out more information about the Diesel Technology Forum. And make sure you watch this interview over here. Talking DEF Fluid, it's pretty interesting stuff. Also find us on pickuptrucktalk.com. Those three words work again on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Trust me, I've done it. We're there. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you down the road.